Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural, with our two legal experts, Royce Russell Esquire, Edward Pichado Esquire, and myself, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. Thank you for tuning in to be a part of the show, sharing your commentary and your thoughts on what our legal experts share. Live, we thank you for being here. If you're catching the replay, hashtag replay when you're watching so that we know that you're here. And we look forward to continuing to provide you content that can help you navigate what we see happening in the world around us and getting insight on where we can be instrumental in advocating for the rights of everyone. So today we have a full show with a lot of content. But before we get started, as always, our co-hosts would like to say a few words of welcome. Señor Pichado, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, hello everyone, good afternoon. Hola mi gente, ¿cómo estamos hoy? Hay un lío en la legislatura, en el Congreso. So vamos a ir de eso hoy. We're going to hear about some beef going on in the legislature concerning redistricting, so stay tuned. I believe you're going to find this information to be quite informational and fulfilling, so stay tuned.
Thank you. And Mr. Russell.
Welcome, everybody. I have these frames on today. If anybody follow the show, I'm a fan of making sure that I coordinate, right? And you go do the research on what that means when someone says coordinate. That's the culture coming into this show, because that's what we do in Speaking Legally, right? We take the legal, we take the culture, we bring it together. So, depending upon what I'm wearing, I may have different frames on. So today, can anybody guess why I have these frames on? Ed, I give you one guess.
Because they go with orange?
No, close. Dr. Grant, I give you one guess.
I plead the fifth.
Well, you can't plead the fifth on the show now.
I can't.
You gotta guess.
Well, they seem to be clear.
Here we go. See, now this
is clear how I view of things.
Here we go. There we go. That law degree, that JD didn't go for nowhere. That years of experience on the plate. We're gonna run with clarity, because that's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to bring some clarity. There's stuff that's in the news today legally, and we want to make sure that you can see clearly, think clearly, and take away the clear thoughts that we're trying to impress upon you when it comes down to what we're about to lay on you today, from the beef in the legislation to criminal charges to everything that we're discussing today. We need for you to have a clear mind. We're going to bring some clear thoughts. We're going to bring some clarity to what's happening, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Well, I appreciate your commentary. And yes, it's one of those days for me where, as we begin to talk about the first part of the news, which are lives lost in Buffalo and what we saw happen, there's been a lot of transition. Clearly, in the last couple of years, we've all seen a lot of transition. But this morning, I got hit personally with the transition of my aunt. So it's fresh, and, mourning and loss is never easy. So our condolences go out to these families who are living through the grief of losing their loved ones so unexpectedly in this horrific shooting that has now been labeled a hate crime. And there's now footage that's coming out about the radio call, about things that happened with 911. And we just want to say, before we get into talking about this story, that our hearts go out to all the families that were affected. When you look at the pictures of some of the elders in our community who lived past 77, and to be gunned down like that, and the young people, it's heart-wrenching. So for everyone who's experiencing it in their personal life and watching publicly what's going on, just know our hearts and prayers go with you. So let's get into talking about what in the world happened, and the fact that this is also triggering the responses within our community of how this gentleman was handled, and how we never get even those courtesies when we commit a crime.
Yeah, that's heavy, because we've been through this when we saw the shooting in South Carolina, right? I think in that case, the defendant, the accused, the assailant, the hate crimer, the bigot, the racist, whatever name you wanted to align with that individual, who was Caucasian, who was white, That person was, I think they stopped at the local fast food place to get him something to eat before they brought him into the station, right? Now, you fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, all that other good saying, right? As Bush messed that up and I'm doing right now. They treated him and they treated this defendant in a way that we'll never know, right? Because they're not going to put that out in the media, right? There has to be somebody, when we talk about infiltrate, right? I always talk about when we speak about cardiac arrest, we need to infiltrate. We need to have people of color on law enforcement. So the word can get out as to what is actually happening, right? This person made it out alive. Come on now. He made it out alive. Like that is just, for a person of color, that's unheard of, right? And he's going to definitely live to see another day, which might be more suitable than a quick death, right? It might be more suitable. But when we talking about conspiracy theories, right? Treat it with kid gloves. And I'm gonna lay it down the way I see it, right? If he's not sentenced to the death penalty because it's in New York, right? So that means life imprisonment, right? If it's a capital case, then there he goes. But we all know Aryan race, protection within prison, isolation, right? 24/7 lockdown, protective custody. So he's not going to be in harm's way at all. And if that was a person of color, we wouldn't even made it out of that supermarket parking lot.
Not at all. Not at
Well,
all.
I think one of the interesting conversations that this is that has surfaced behind this is this replacement theory that a lot of these white supremacists have been pushing, saying that you will not replace us. And you heard that down, I believe, in Charlottesville, that chant and this idea that these white men, white males, white people, period, are feeling somehow under siege by the other and supposedly afraid to be replaced. They are looking at how this young man, quote unquote, got radicalized. And I've noticed that they've been trying to find like excuses about, it was the pandemic and it was this or that. And that's what did it, and as Royce was speaking earlier, that's going to be the conversation for now. Nobody's even talking about, well, what kind of quote unquote radicalization, indoctrination is going to take place while he's in prison, right? I mean, bottom line is this young man, he traveled from a suburb called Conklin. Now, Conklin is a suburb of where I went to college undergrad, Binghamton. It's a surrounding community. He basically looked for and found the nearest, I guess, quote unquote, African-American stronghold or area with the largest concentration of Black people, i.e. Buffalo, to travel to, and travel he did. And, and apparently he had actually gone up there before just to
it's all mapped out, all planned out.
Mapped it out, figured out how he was going to do. In this case, he actually had on a bulletproof vest that was of such thickness that when the retired police officer who was serving as security shot at him, he couldn't take him down and instead ended up getting killed by this young man with an AR-15. And he was able to legally purchase that in this state, but Governor Hochul is saying not the actual specialized clip
ammunition
that enabled this type of shooting, that was purchased in the, would have had to have been purchased in possibly the surrounding state of Pennsylvania that allows that type of ammunition to be purchased in terms of the law.
I really don't know what that means though, Ed. Like I hear her statement and I understand you were trying to mitigate, but once you can get the gun, you load it with whatever you want to load it with, right? I mean,
listen, at the end of the day,
at
the end of the day, there's all sorts of problems. My understanding is right now in the legislature, there's a law being debated, being proposed for passage, having to do with these ghost guns, these guns that you order the parts, and then once you get them, you're able to put it together. There's a bunch of those on the streets. you know, a lot of things that's happening is because I believe the debate is they want to put in an other clause in the law to cover these repeated instances where folks figure out a way to get around the law in order to be able to do what is otherwise, you know, illegal. You know, and they get fought every step of the way by, you know, the Second Amendment gun proponents, the NRA folks who are like, nah, you know, the right to possess should be blanket. And they'll go and say, oh, if all those people would have been strapped at that supermarket, you know, maybe he wouldn't have been able to do what he did, you know, which is nonsense at the end of the day. You saw that the security guard couldn't even take him down because he had this, you know,
bulletproof vest on, you know what I mean? So yeah, their argument never makes sense. What is frustrating is how we let it go on and how you know, it's almost, I'll make the comparison to terrorists that we see, right? People that commit suicide bombings. They go in, they blow up themselves because they want to blow up a greater number of people, right? For whatever racist or religious reasons. And those who fortify those type of acts, they're willing to take some losses, right? So the Second Amendment folks, they're willing to take the loss of this individual, right, who went in there and shot up the supermarket. They're willing to take those losses to make sure that they can still possess it. They don't care. 28, 38, 44 people die, as long as they can still carry, because all they care about is themselves, right? And the casualties of casualty. You want to talk about terrorism? How is he any different? How is he any different than strapping a bomb and walking into a supermarket and blowing it up? And and law enforcement, on any given day, you driving without your license, you fail to stop, you go in your glove compartment, you spit on me, you run, tasered, shot dead if you're a person of color. You know, I told him to put his hands down. You got a knife and you're in your own home and you entering that person's home illegally and you're cooking and you wind up dead. Come on, man, give me a break with this. This guy's able to leave the supermarket and lay down, and that's it. Now, I'm not advocating that violence beget violence, but come on.
Well, let's just pause.
I'm wearing these glasses for a reason. I'm wearing these frames for a reason. It's clear.
Listen, as you're looking, I put up on the screen something that's been circulating, right, with all these heavily armed white males who still survive, but unarmed Black individuals dead, murdered. Right. Like this, whoever put this together, because you know we're quick on creating graphics and images to help express what's on our heart. But for anyone who can't understand the frustration, just look at this. Look at this.
And this is just the ones that hit the media, right? We're not even talking about the day-to-day, right? Because we know the mass shootings of those who are racist, you know, they're going to hit the media. There's so many other deaths, like the death in Oklahoma. That video just came out. Brother was standing there and they shot him 6 times. They shot him 3 times and then they shot him, or 6 times, and they shot him 3 more times when he was on the floor. That the body camera, the footage was suppressed. It finally came out thanks to those in the media, finally got it out. And all this time, the police officers denying that it even happened. You would never even heard about it. Well, you still don't know about it.
And I think the unfortunate feature of some of this is it becomes apparent that what you're dealing with is this affinity issue, right? This idea that, oh, he looks like my son, he looks like my cousin, he looks like my nephew, and so
he represents my suppressed thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, in either case, the idea then surfaces about this being unfortunate and what happened to this otherwise a lovely young man. They talk to the parents. The parents are like, oh no, we don't know what happened, and we don't know. And instead of just dealing with this as pure evil and the ideas of those who think this is okay as pure evil, and pursuing those who peddle whatever filth on the internet that allows for these thoughts to surface in sick minds. I mean, you don't see that pursuit of you know, like, listen, we got to get rid of this menace in our society. You don't see that attitude, that vigor, that listen, we got to get rid of all of this hate, period, point blank. You don't see that because there are a number of people in power who thrive and feed off of that hate to support themselves. You got members of Congress, you got members of the legislature who support a lot of these ideas and will deny it and say, oh no, I didn't mean like that. I'm just saying that, we need to not have, immigrants, or we need to not talk about Black history because that's not productive. All of this stuff that at the end of the day, at its final journey is this. Because the minute you start inserting in someone's minds that someone is lesser than, a lesser being, you automatically then make them expendable at that point.
And to add to that, or you've missed this opportunity because this other person exists. No, you missed the opportunity because you're not qualified in all shape, form, or fashion. No one's giving me this idea that, you know what, I was watching, and so here, let's bring the cultural again, right? We never gonna miss a segment where we don't bring the cultural. It's this show called ATL, right? ATL is on AMC or one of these stations, right? And it's about this rapper, and he's in London, the brother is in London, and they do these episodes that are very profound. And one episode had the late Kevin Samuels on it, and they was giving scholarships to only Black students in this one high school. Well, it was this kid who was biracial, and he's been assimilating with white students all day, and he really wanted to go to this school. And the only way he can go to this school is that he get a scholarship. So this character came in, said, we're going to give scholarships to all the Black folks. So now here he is faced with this dilemma. Do I show my hand or do I stay on this other side? Well, education was so important to him that he showed his hand, right? So then he got the scholarship, right? And then somewhere down the line, actually, he didn't get the scholarship, somewhere down, because he was told that he wasn't Black enough. So he decided he's going to burn down the school. So that's what he went because he was playing these video games where you could torch things. So he went and made this gun where he could burn down the school. On the flip side, stay with me. On the flip side, there was an African brother who was also told that he wasn't Black because he was from Africa. He wasn't Black. He was an African American, right? You ain't struggle the way we struggle. So he was annoyed too. Guess what? He came with his torch burner to burn down the school, right? So when he gets there, he sees what he thinks is a white guy burning down the school. So he takes offense to it. And he's like, well, you didn't get the scholarship because you're not Black. And you didn't get the scholarship because you wasn't Black enough. So they turn on each other. End of the story, right? Police come. They shoot the brother who got the torch. The white guy who got the torch walks away.
Oh, the halfway guy, right?
No, halfway. Well, a white appearing individual.
The passing.
He walks away. Walks away.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is let's see what happens from here. This is awful.
Well, we know what's going to happen because this is one of the things that we always talk about, right? Being in the right places and right mind. Now, I'm not saying this person is going to let their culturalism blind their pursuit for justice, but it just so happens that there is African-American sister who's in charge of this at the U.S. Attorney's Office and who will be prosecuting this case. And the African-American retired police officer that was killed went to the same high school that they went to. So sometimes you got to be in the right place to make sure justice runs its course. And you have to worry about what will happen.
Yeah, and it looks like she's going to have a strong case for this as a hate crime.
I mean, we went through hate crimes before.
And the documentation regarding what this individual was communicating prior to, and the recording of it. I believe he live streamed it.
Live. He did it on live, right? We have the follow up as far as Facebook and his social media, and we have the act.
That is insane. And then the fact that I think the live streaming it just adds insult to injury on what this was so intentional and deliberate about, and that no one on the side of justifying this can see how they're breeding, because they're intentionally breeding this kind of violence. This is insane. We're in 2022 and we are watching live someone intentionally carrying out this hate crime. And we know what happens when you put things out there and you give it life. So this is very disturbing. And I don't know how we can continue as a country to allow for no movement on gun reform. I just I don't get it.
I
Well,
said this before. I
we're
said
gonna
this
see in
before, and
the
I'll say
midterm
it again.
election.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What you said?
I said we're going to see in midterm elections because the bottom line is the public needs to decide whether or not it's okay with continuous mass shootings. I believe there have been like a number of these, possibly in the three figures in terms of the amount of mass shootings, regardless of racial motivation. And then when you talk about racially motivated, that's another, awful number as well. I mean, there was a gentleman, I believe, out in California who shot. He was a Chinese gentleman who didn't like Taiwanese people, so ended up shooting them in some sort of church, I believe. Just awful.
Well, I think what happens here is, once again, right? What liberties are we willing to scale back from, right? We look at 9/11, right? Folks up in arms about being searched at the airport. Like, are you kidding me? This could prevent from an airplane from going down. And you worried about being searched at the airport before you get on? You'd be surprised what midterm elections would reveal, right? Where one's priority is. And you'd be surprised to understand who is really in power. All this moving and things that are going on in real life, everybody's moving around. Are you moving with a purpose, or are you just moving? And sometimes you'll find out that you're just moving because what is going to happen is going to happen because there's other people moving with a purpose. And now we know, and we can't say for sure that on this date and this time there's an uptick. I can't say that for sure, but
Right.
we all will say that there is a correlation between President 45 and the uptick of these type of acts. And let's have at it.
It goes farther back than 45.
Without a
I
question.
mean, like H. Rap Brown said, violence is as American as cherry pie. I mean, this, unfortunately, we have a violent history and it continues to rear its ugly head time and time again.
It's all about surgeons, and we have the surge. We have the surge now, and I could put money on it that the mass shootings is not going to change the minds of many people that are behind Second Amendment and making sure that that stays live and well.
Mm.
You had the mass shootings, and then in Atlanta, April 12th, 2022, they passed a law that you can carry a gun. It doesn't have to be concealed. You can carry it out openly, right? Is that law for Second Amendment rights, or is that law for us to make sure that we are extinguished? Some of this stuff is cutting too close to the rug where you can't say, oh, yeah, that dude that's at the barbershop is crazy. Every time you talk to me, he has some conspiracy theory. No.
I just it's really disturbing the state of where we are as a country. And as we continue to unfortunately have these conversations and not see things change, we can be discouraged. And Richard, you said a great point. As long as evil exists, hatred will live. And we have to do our part culturally to make people aware of how we advocate for the change, that we don't give up. Because I think there's also that hope that we're just not organized enough to keep the pressure on to make the changes that need to happen, to hold people accountable for the state of the country and what breeds this kind of evil and violence. So, once again, my heart is tender just thinking about all of these families who are thrust into the national news cycle because of this evil act of one individual, and how justice is not played out the same way for everyone across this country. And he is sitting, I don't, was he bailed out? Did they give him bail?
Oh, no way. No.
Okay. All right. I was just hoping. I was like, Lord, I don't let that, because I turned off that part of the news cycle. But there's so much to unpack with this, what it says, what it speaks to, what it condones. And we just have to stay diligent and not giving up on advocating for justice, and having both of you as attorneys to fight and chart those courses for clients. Someone else put in the chat earlier that they wish more law enforcement, more African Americans would enter in law enforcement. Roland said Robert L. Williams is probably the only brother who comes to mind as a black man who shot 2 cops and went on to shoot a police precinct without getting shot. When we were talking about the examples, like there's just so much. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for tuning in and being here. It just triggers so much trauma for our community every time we see something like this play out. And that's why, as we spoke about on a previous show, we have to take care of our mental health as well and talking through. And this show becomes part of the intellectual therapy that you can have with just looking at the facts, finding out where the recourse is legally, and what we need to do to keep the pressure going as a community for the changes that we need. Roland said that he has another comment here, so I want to bring that up. The systemic fostering of white hate and the value of it in society and governmental structure of this country is a main culprit. The normalcy of violence and easy access to guns is foundational to this country. Hell, one of the first laws about guns on this land was established in the colony of Virginia, saying white men had to carry them in order to shoot indigenous people. It was illegal to not have a gun and not kill people whose land they were on. It was illegal, rather, to not have a gun and not kill people whose land that they're on. Powerful words, Roland. This is the kind of discourse that comes when we witness this tragedy, and we'll continue to pray for the families and pray that we don't give up. We don't get too tired now to continue to fight for what is right and for the rights of others. So it looks like Attorney Pichardo had something else to add before we get to the next story that we're going to highlight today.
No, just may those folks rest in peace.
Absolutely. Mr. Russell?
No, I'm ready to, unfortunately, we'll never be ready to move on, but we need to keep an eye on this, right? And we'll see how the justice system and the wheels of justice spin. Absolutely. And we'll see whether CNN and all these other media outlets do the day-by-day, play-by-play of this trial. How about that?
Absolutely. Let's see. And we will be watching. So, speaking of watching, New York State in the news, as always, passes a bill limiting the use of song lyrics in court.
Ooh, yeah, this hits right at home for a couple of reasons. One, the folks that are behind it, the Jay-Z's, the Meek Mills, the Fat Joes. I'm telling you right now, I'm so proud that they put their smart hat on and put down their hard hat, right? Because a smart man can see how this is all playing out, right? And what do I mean by that? Let's go to what's popping in everybody's brain, right? I mean, Young Thugs and Gunna, right? I mean, that's where we start in this conversation, and that's how we get to this point, right? Now, this is why has light shown on it in reference to trying to pass this bill, songs and lyrics in courtroom, because what we see in the Young Gun and Gunna RICO 56 count or 88 count indictment out in Atlanta, what we see and what we have saw with the prosecution of Bobby Smyrna and the prosecution of Gotti, what we see is the federal government and prosecutors following the lyrics of songs, not just the lyrics in and of itself, but following it and also following the interactions and actions of those that are producing this music and creating a criminal document in order to prosecute. So now we hear a lot about RICO, and we talked about this. How did we want to attack this today? Do we want to go through, defining what RICO is, and because the community needs to know? And part of me want to do that. The other part wants to really talk about the cultural part, which is really a warning shot out there so everybody can really understand what's going on. So I'll start with the RICO, right? We know that, when we talk about RICO, we're talking about the federal government, and we talk about prosecution by the federal government. And we're not talking about a 2 to 4, right? We're not talking about 5 years. We're talking about going away for a long time. And so what is RICO? RICO is the racketeer, influence, and corporate organization corruption within a corporate organization. So when we look at Young Thug and Gunna, Young Thug, his real name is Jeffrey Williams, right? We look at what the government has brought forth. What they did is that they, part and parcel, not all of it, because I didn't read the whole indictment. What they did is that they were tracking these two individuals as artists and was tracking their record label, which I believe is registered, and it's called Young Stoner Life label. Now that has changed into Young Slim Life. They switched that and said that is really Young Slim Life, which is a gang organization, right? Or which is a gang, which equals organization, which makes it right for RICO. Now, how does RICO work? RICO really goes to crimes such as bribery, kidnapping, murder, drug trafficking. Now, there's also a predicate act that needs to go with that in order for you to be charged with it. So the predicate act is, let's just say, I go and sell drugs or kill someone for the greater good of a bigger crime, which is to either supply the organization, the gang, with money, or position the organization or gang territory or something of that nature. Now, little history. RICO was really for mafia organizations like that, right? That had infrastructure, had hierarchy, had almost a corporate structure that has transcended to street gangs, where there may be some hierarchy, not in the necessary sense that we see in Fortune 500, but some hierarchy or some very loose hierarchy. What do I mean by loose hierarchy? Well, if I'm the biggest and the strongest, and I can beat everybody else that's on the block, you might consider me the leader. I may not mentally be the leader. I may not actually be the leader, but because I can sell the most wolf tickets and I'm good with my hands, you may think I'm the leader. And then you go from there. Someone else spends a lot of time in jail. They get out. Oh, so they might be a major. They might be a lieutenant. You name it. That's how you get the loose hierarchy. What's scary about that is that a lot of this is based upon just being associated, being seen with, being around,
being present.
And you know how many times I've come from law school and come from college and went back around my neighborhood and saw folks and was giving them pounds and hugging and standing in front of the building, catching up, and they step to the side. They may have to take care of their business. They come back and we laugh and we giggle. You know how many pictures and shots could have been done of that? Saying, oh yeah, now he's affiliated. Now he's part of it. Now he's part of the crew, right? And so that's how you start to build a case.
And not to mention a database that we talked about on previous shows.
That's right. Every time you're arrested, every time they got your DNA, that's built in. Now, you take that with someone rapping. Now, here, see, now this is where the culture really gets real dicey at. You know, you and I are going to be wrestling on this because this is First Amendment. This is poetry. This is art. This is criminality, all mixed up in the bag. And so this is what I'll say, and chime in whenever you feel necessary. This is what I'll say, right? Most people, when you talk about the authenticity of rap, you get snapped on, talked down, kicked out of the room if you rapping about a life that you don't live. Query, cultural, better start thinking about it. Think about this is a teachable moment right here. Right? We put the indictment on the shelf. Let's go to the cultural part. This is a teachable moment out here, right? You get street credibility in rapping by living the life that you rap about. Now, we all know there's a large portion of people that rap about shit that they ain't never even did before. And we know there's some people that rap about things that they had done before. And we know that if we go on social media, we can see stories about those who lived a certain life. They were making records, but they weren't making enough money from the record. So they still had to live that life to balance it until they made it big. And so now what the government, this is my opinion, what the government has done, whether it's state or local, is now they're trying to put two and two together. Well, you rapping about that. And people are loving you because you about it. So these things must have happened. Place a body, place a transaction, place you in a certain place, place you actually giving 5 to the real drug dealer, even though you're not one, but the real drug dealer is giving you slice because you grew up in the neighborhood, so you cool people, or in order to play at this venue, you got to pay for protection. So, you know, some money is exchanged, some hands are exchanged, some funds are exchanged. And so now all of a sudden, the smallest of acts is elevated to the biggest of acts. And now the guy who just got on the phone who said, yo, I'll meet you at the spot, is stuck in a 88 count indictment regarding RICO violations, conspiracy, street gang acts. And it's like, yo, wait a minute. I just said, what's up?
And one of the key things to think about here is the fact that creative expression is protected by the First Amendment. You are
maybe not now.
I mean, fundamentally, you're allowed to do poetry, as was stated, song lyrics,
spoken word.
You're allowed to make movies. You're allowed to make plays, and you're allowed to provide your audience with, say, a fantasy of or portrayal of some act that you did not commit in real life, or is not really, as you stated earlier, your life. People in the hood dream about becoming rich someday and having mansions and all sorts of cars and all these things, and they talk about it, and they in many cases will dress in a way that portrays them as having all of this wealth and splendor, when in fact that big gold chain is hollow as can be. You know, the
gold chain is on loan. You better get it back by 6 o'clock tonight, right?
The car is rented. The you know, I mean, people in the hood, all they have is their dreams. All they have is their thoughts of living a certain way someday. It's what keeps them from becoming so depressed they take their own lives. So what do? They wish for something that is not in their present right now, and for law enforcement authorities to exploit that and then have to interpret that like, oh, well, in this lyric he meant to say this, or this is what this really meant, and we coordinated it with this. I mean,
and on top of that, Ed, who's to say that there's socially economic disadvantage? You got middle-aged guys, you know, I mean, middle-class guys rapping about stuff that they never ever did before. And we're not always talking about the young. Some of these rappers are 32, 33, 28, 29 years old, right? They may be, if they lived that life, they lived that life a long time ago. Now they
didn't really live it at all. You normally hear about these you know, hip hop entertainers criticizing each other for not, quote unquote, keeping it real, being real. Oh, you know, I knew you back in the day. You were be home by 5 o'clock. You know, you weren't out on the streets. I was, and they're competing for who.
And so now you have law enforcement. Who's not. Law enforcement is going to make the determination that what is fiction is now fact, right? Now, here's the other teachable moment. We out here, because it's mostly people of color that's rapping, right? And then we call a fact a fact. You out here, words have meaning. People are watching you. Things are going down, right? You got to understand that there's a population out here that wants you gone. They don't want you around. Gun violence is on the uptick, right? You have to understand what is going on. We watch NAA talk about more radical, more profound, more, I don't want to say more violent driven, but had the suggestion of revolutionary reform. Nothing happened. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for it. They didn't get a pass. No, nobody was shooting in the streets. 11-year-old wasn't getting shot on the street corner, you know?
And listen, if we're going to criminalize rhetoric, then let's really do it, right? Let's not just go after.
We got to go for the big screen. We got to go for big screen. We got to go for movies. We got to go for the whole can and caboodle.
Oh no! How about these white supremacists who are talking about all these things? And when the prosecutor comes knocking on their door, they say, "Well, I haven't done anything. I'm just doing a whole lot of talking," and that's not a crime, right?
So now you're 100% correct, and this is where I think the indictment to me is far-reaching, right? So you have to establish, and this is going back to the legal. you have to establish organization. You have to establish structure. What I do on 135th Street at 8 o'clock, how are you going to parlay that into what Ed is doing on the Bronx on Fordham Road and say that we got structure and what I'm doing here is for the benefit of him? That's where I think the cards and the house is going to fall down, right? It's because how are you going to be able to tie my act to someone else when there actually isn't any organization and when there actually isn't any structure? And I think there's a great argument, art versus evidence. What is art and what is evidentiary? What can you put together? First Amendment rights. There is, look, if you haven't called me, you better call me so I can get out to Atlanta and represent someone. If you haven't, you better. And if you don't believe it, do the research. Do the research. Hey, look, you got to promote yourself all day, every day. Do the research. Let's get down. Let's fight this fight. Let's see what's here. And if there's something behind door number one, then we could talk about that too. But for everybody else out there, you trying to say, hey, look, I lived this life. This is what I did. This is where I go. Be mindful. Other people are watching. And once again, I'll take my hat off again to Fat Joe, to Jay-Z, Meek Mills. All of them may have had issues with the legal system, but they are savvy enough and smart enough to see it coming because the pitch is coming real slow. Somebody else in Atlanta today, you in New York tomorrow.
We can't hear you, Dr. Brown.
And you want to talk about a way, and we've seen this with the mayor. The mayor has talked about, yes. Hey, look, what's the music they called? Trap. Yeah. We're gonna get rid of that. We gotta expose that because that's creating violence. It's already there. The writing's on the wall. So these brothers are smart enough to see it and say, hey, wait a minute, let's have this conversation. What's First Amendment? What's artistic? What is poetry? What is evidence?
Yes, it's drill rap. Roland corrected us. It's the drill music, not
drill music.
So thank you, Roland, keeping us honest out here. And this is where the legal meets the culture. We really need to look at life imitating art, art imitating life, where it hits the legal system, what this affects, how far and wide does this go. There's so many layers to this particular portion of what we're discussing that it's going to play out. And I'm interested to see what happens with New York, doing this, because everyone watches New York, watches what happens, and what we actually put in law here and how that affects the rest of the country. So
one of the things, I mean to interrupt you, Dr. Grant, one of the things that I find funny when I look at, or find peculiar when I look at the selling of the RICO charges in reference to YSL is I don't know any corrupt organization that actually sell t-shirts and sweatpants in brick and mortar, direct sale on TV. I mean, direct sale on the internet. Like that's like you didn't see, like you don't have the Palumbo family or the Gotti family having t-shirts and selling them sweatpants and sweatshirts. So that just leads me to believe that, are we stretching this? Like, are you changing names to fit a narrative? And what narrative are we trying to fit?
That part. So to be continued, but I'm glad we have the two of you as legal experts here as we move to this next conversation, and we navigate all of what's happening, because there's a lot happening in real time. So the moral of the story is to be engaged, to get proper information, to talk to legal experts like the two on this show, so that you can get the perspective due to the framing of how you see and what you are dealing with, knowing the facts and the law and how that implicates what we are viewing. So before we get into this last story of the day, Richard said, did violence create the music, or did the music create the violence? That's one to grow on. That's an ongoing debate, Richard, about, art imitating life, life imitating art. Where does it come from? What does it speak to? And yeah, this will continue on.
But the fact remains is that there's people of color that is being endangered by this action, point blank. That's a fact. right? And to this next story here, this next story reminds me of Ed of what I always say is while we're sleeping, they're thinking. While we're sleeping, they're thinking. And what have they thought up here, Dr. Grant?
Well,
Special master carves up New York's congressional and state Senate seats with new maps. Go figure. Where do these lines lie?
okay. Well, what's happening here is basically this. Every 10 years, there's a census, right? Everybody's familiar with the census. You fill out the forms or you otherwise enter your information as to the makeup of your family, your racial or ethnic background. You know, there's several questions that are put forth in that document. And one of the main functions of that document is not just to count population, but also to see the makeup of communities and to figure out whether certain communities in a certain geographical area have a community of interest, whether they have things in common, whether they have similar policy interests and needs. And so once that information is gathered, there's this process called redistricting, the drawing of lines, legislative lines. Some of you may ask, well, how is it that they or those in power came up with the idea that this should be the district, and where does it begin and where does it end, and so forth? And so that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the drawing or redrawing of legislative lines, and that's supposed to take place every 10 years based on the census. You're supposed to look at the new data and see if the district needs to be redrawn. Unfortunately, in the state of New York, this has been a problem for quite some time. Back as a result of the last census, and when district lines needed to be drawn, in fact, the Democratic Assembly and the Republican Senate couldn't come to an agreement. So eventually, the congressional lines, not the state Senate lines and the assembly lines, but the congressional lines, the federal congressional lines, ended up having to be drawn by the judiciary, once again through the use of a special master, and they had to be approved by a 3-judge panel. So fast forward to today, what happens? Well, in 2014, there was a constitutional amendment that was passed that was supposed to make the drawing of the lines an independent, neutral process, if you will. And so what ended up happening was that the constitutional amendment created what was called the Independent Redistricting Commission. Now, this is a commission that was created with 10 members, 4 Republican, 4 Democrat. So now you have 8 and 2 independents. Well, what ends up happening? One side picks their independent, the other side picks their independent. So what happens? You might as well have 5 Republican and 5 Dems, right? So when it came time to redraw the lines for the coming election, what happens? There's deadlock. Why is there deadlock? Because you got an even number, right? And one of the lessons here is that I'm pretty sure you have as well, Royce, and possibly you, Dr. Grant. We've belonged to possibly nonprofits that were created, and you have to create the bylaws. And in those bylaws, usually that number for any vote is made uneven, right? You don't want to make it even.
That's right, because you always forever have a deadlock.
Why that didn't happen here, it just baffles me that you would, with something like this, you would have an even number of members as part of it. So what ends up happening is one side creates their own map, the other side creates their own map, and there's deadlock. They can't come to an agreement on a map that is then to be offered to the state legislature for passage and the governor for signing. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is that, well, they were supposed to have 2 chances to come up with a map. What ends up happening here is the state legislature says, you know what, if you guys can't fulfill your legal duty to redraw the lines and come up with a map, we'll do it for you like we've done in the past. So what ends up happening is the Democratic controlled assembly the Democratic controlled Senate and the Democratic governor, they all say, okay, here's the lines, here's the redrawn map, and they say this is going to be the map for the coming elections.
Why isn't that the end of it? Why isn't that?
No, that's not the end, right? So
no, I'm saying, but why isn't that the end of it? We control, the Democrats control this, you control that, you control this. You come up, it's over.
I'm sorry, my friend, but that is not the end. What ends up happening is the Republicans say, hey, wait a minute. The constitutional amendment says districts shall not be drawn to discourage competition or for purpose of favoring or disfavoring incumbents or other particular candidates or political parties.
Now stop right there. Stop right there. That's been on the books forever, right?
No. That was
no. Look, forever. When I mean forever, not forever ever in time. It's been there forever that Democrats can use it to their advantage. And
well, the language in the voting rights bill on the federal level wasn't that, like, it wasn't this right here. It's other language about a community of interest and so forth.
But
right?
how does it get to that language?
Okay,
right
so now let me explain. So because of this language, when the Republicans go to court and ask for an injunction to stop the Democrats from implementing this legislative map, they go to a judge in Steuben County up north. They get themselves a Judge Patrick McAllister in Steuben County. Judge McAllister reviews the map and says, you know what? This map is partisan. It's unconstitutional. Throws out the entire map, not just for, say, Assembly and Senate, but also the Congress, because we're talking about three different legislative lines right here, right? You got the Congress, you got the state assembly, you got the state Senate. All of these are different maps, right? That judge says, no, unconstitutional. I'm going to appoint a special master to draw a map that is in line with the law.
As he interprets it.
The Democrats appeal. They take the case to the appellate division, 4th Department, for the edification of the audience. I think we've explained this before. You got the state Supreme Court, which is the trial court. You got the appellate division, which is like the intermediate appellate court. There's a number of them here in Manhattan, in the city. It's 1st Department, Brooklyn, Long Island is 2nd, and so on. So you got these different departments by number. So up there, 4th Department, here's the case. Interestingly enough, the 4th appellate division is dominated by Democrats. You would think that the Dems are like, man, no problem. That's our boys up there. That's our homegirls. They're going to take care of us. Nope.
That's stop right there.
Nope.
That's where Dr. Grant says, put a pin in it.
Mm-hmm.
We can't, I'm saying we, and you know what I mean. Like, you can't tie your shoes. You can't chew gum and think at the same time. Like, while you sleeping, you actually sleeping. While other people sleeping, they actually thinking. Like, what's going on here, man?
I think we need a little bit more time to break this down as well, because
let me kind of run through it real quick just for the edification of the audience. I'm not going to take too much longer. So what ends up happening is, in a 3-2 decision, the appellate division says, nah, the map is unconstitutional. They say that
our people reject us.
They reject the congressional map, but they say that the Assembly and the Senate maps are okay, right? They vet those. The Republicans, I believe both sides appeal because they both had disagreements with this decision. It goes to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals also dominated 4-3 decision, says congressional map, Senate map, no good, must go.
People's
The
again.
Assembly map is upheld on some technicality. The trial court can appoint a special master to draw the lines. Because remember, the original argument was that the legislature did not even have the power to draw a map, that was a function that was given by constitutional amendment to this independent redistricting commission or a neutral. So they say, listen, trial court gets to appoint a special master. That special master then draws his own map, white guy, Carnegie Mellon fellow, something like that. He draws the map. What happens? That map came out a draft of it came out on Monday. Today is the last day for comments. Friday, it gets implemented. No appellate review here because it went to the highest court, which was the Court of Appeals. Also,
every step of the way, people that's supposed to be on your side jerked you.
So things are so bad right now that my good friend Congressman Hakeem Jeffries had his Bed-Stuy neighborhood in his district sliced, I believe, like in half, and it went into Congresswoman Yvette Clarke's district because Hakeem is the 8th, Yvette Clarke is the 9th, and by the way, they redistricted him out of his own district, so he now, according to this map, no longer lives in his own district. He's allowed to run and occupy the seat because he's a resident of New York State.
Right. Oh my goodness. This we're at the top of the hour already, and I thank you for giving that additional context. I think we need to.
It's trouble. It's trouble. It's you only laugh because you don't want to cry because it's trouble, and we're gonna feel it because there's another 10 years before this thing can even get talked about again.
But let's go back.
About power at the end of the day.
Let's rewind our shows when we talked about the census. Let's rewind that on this show, we talked about how important it was to make sure that everyone completed the census. We've been talking about getting engaged. This is where the legal meets the cultural. We've been speaking about it. So now in real time, everyone is seeing what happens when we don't fully participate and engage. And
Dr. Grant, no, they haven't seen what happened. When it feels them and it hits them, then they'll see. It's like we got blinders on. We know it's coming. We see like the train is coming, but nah, it's going to dip to the left. I'm gonna be all right. No, it's not dipping to the left. It's coming right at you.
And listen,
coming right at you.
And listen, for my Latinos, for instance, Nydia Velázquez, Congresswoman in Brooklyn, Boricua, she had, I believe, 20% of her Latinos move to a district that's connected to Staten Island.
So now who's running when and where? And who's going to get control of what?
Mondale Jones, black, I believe, states he's in, I mean, there's all, I mean, this thing is, it's having reverberations everywhere in terms of what could possibly happening. It's allowing for candidates who previously didn't even consider running because they see this other district is diluted now in their favor and they can run in there and be successful. It's
mine.
It's the way it's supposed to be because while we're sleeping, they're thinking.
Wow, that's a way to end today's show. When I saw it come out and I saw it was happening, I was like, oh my goodness, this is what we saw the precursor, and here we are. This is not the last we're going to talk about this because the effects of it, to Mr. Russell's point, we haven't seen once the collision happens, what's going down. These are just the warnings that are here, and today is the last day, once again, for comments on it. We'll see what happens with any challenges and changes. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here to provide this information. Thank you, Kevin, Richard, Roland, and everyone who's watching the replay or watching live on one of our other platforms. Thank you for being here and a part of the conversation. And we'll be back again with updates on where we stand on all that's happening in the world. Final comments as we close out.
I just, once again, I share the whole theme of clarity here because I didn't even get to talk about how that recent election, when we had to vote on those referendums and stuff, that affected this in terms of people properly reading their ballot and understanding what it is that they're voting or not voting for. So I just leave it there. Take care.
And you're not wearing your glasses today, but it is. I can see that you're thinking clearly. We're gonna get you some clear frames. You can join the crew.
Make them gazelles.
Make them gazelles, right?
No lenses.
I appreciate your legal analysis like I do all the time. And I think I know you're correct. Clarity. That's what it's all about. That's what I started with. That's the summation. That's it. It's clarity from the beginning, from the top to the bottom. And that's what we do.
All right, everyone. Have a good day. Stay safe and be well.